Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of Middle Grade Ninja. I'm your host, Rob Kent. As you know, I'm the author of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees, which, as always, is available as an audiobook, a paperback, but the ebook, esteemed audience, the ebook is free to download whenever you're watching or listening to this, wherever fine ebooks are sold. More relevant, perhaps, to tonight's discussion, I am also Robert Kent. That's right, my super secret pen name is 3 more letters on the back of my previous name, or sorry, 2 more letters. Writer, not a mathematician, Robert Kent. So under that super secret pen name, I've written two zombie novels, all together now a zombie story, and all right now a short zombie story. They are for a slightly older audience. It's a young adult novel, a little bit more gore and guts than the zombies we're going to be talking about tonight, but I'd be a fool not to mention it. For more information about all of that, and more importantly, for interviews with thousands of literary agents, editors, authors, all the world's best people, head to middlegradeninja.com, and we've got to get started. I couldn't be more excited. Our guest today is none other than Max Brallier. Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I almost said welcome. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I feel even more welcome now. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're all welcome here.
So, esteemed audience knows that I never torture my guests by making them sit through me summarizing either their biography or their book. How painful for you. So if you would give esteemed audience an overview of your background, and we'll go from there.
Oh boy, I'm also really bad at summarizing my own stuff. I didn't like pitching it, talking about it even. So I write a series called The Last Kids on Earth. I write a series called Eerie Elementary. I read a series called Galactic Hot Dogs, which is a trilogy that I finished. I read a current ongoing series called Mr. Shivers, which is a spooky short story collection. I've written 2 adult zombie novels, both of which were sort of in the style of the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, but not called that, because I call it that. Lawyers show up at my house. And let's see, and I sort of got started writing, as a job, writing activity books and journal books and sticker books for all sorts of stuff, but a lot of sort of Cartoon Network shows, tie-in stuff like that. Yeah, so that's me.
One book that jumped right out to me off your bibliography was Charlie Sheen, Vatican Assassin Warlock.
Oh my god, that one I forgot about. That was, I'm trying to think of where that even exists, if anywhere. I think it's on ebook somewhere you can download. I wrote that with a coworker of mine when I worked in book publishing. Is how I got into writing books. Is I worked in book publishing. And so we would sit around and just kind of come up with ideas for stuff and try to sell book ideas. And nobody had any interest in that, but we wrote it ourselves over like a weekend. And I think we put it up on Amazon or something. I forget. It was it's like a short story back when he was going nuts the first time. All about his drinking tiger blood and stuff. It's about it's story what happened to him while he was shooting Platoon, and he actually, and it's like he basically gets lost on the set and ends up in this weird situation where he gets an infusion of tiger blood and becomes a superhero. It's very bizarre. I've not read that in at least 12 years. Yeah.
I love that it's still out there and widely available, just because you're becoming, or if not already, a household name with The Last Kids on Earth and the Netflix series and the video game and all of that. I love that Charlie Sheen's still out there. Don't let your art die.
Yeah, that's it's some important art the world would miss.
Charlie Sheen being nuts, unfortunately, is probably going to go on being relevant for several more years.
Yeah, seriously.
So I know that you also worked on, you worked for St. Martin's Press in marketing, and then you also worked as a game designer for, is it Poptropica?
Yeah, Poptropica, yes.
Which of those jobs was first?
Well, when I was a game designer for Poptropica, it was like I would do it at a side job at night, and on weekends. I had like a lot of like sort of side hustle things. So I was doing that on the side while I was at St. Martin's. And I think even before it, before St. Martin's, I worked at Penguin, in contracts for a little, like maybe 2 years. So I got into I sort of got into book writing via book publishing, which I got into via an internship at Penguin in the contracts department. And the person I was interning for quit, and they basically offered me her job. It's like after a month, and I was like, sure, I will take that. Yes, please. And so then I was at Penguin for a couple of years, and I was at St. Martin's for more years, maybe 6 years or so, 5 years. And then I took a stab at full-time author, basically, from there.
Did you see you were doing some of the licensed projects while you were there working as with their marketing team, or?
I did the license. No, so I worked with the marketing team, but I had friends from back when I was at Penguin previously, and I would basically just like take people that I knew, like editors and stuff, to lunch and happy hour drinks, and like beg them for anything that like work for hire jobs that they had. So I was working in marketing, but sometimes I would be lucky enough to get like need somebody to write this sticker book. I get like an email out of the blue, and I would sort of work on, they'd have a sticker book to do. I'd take it, I'd work on it during lunch and during the weekend and stuff like that.
Did you always want it? Was author always the goal, or is that something you kind of happily stumbled into?
I kind of happily stumbled into it. My original goal was I was making movies, and I think if I think harder about that, it meant like writing and directing movies. That was the first thing that I really loved. I was a reader growing up, and books were really important to me, but the most sort of the biggest thing in my life, as like maybe starting around like third or fourth grade, up until now, is movies. So when I was in sixth grade, I started writing a movie review column for our local paper called Reviews for Kids. That my mom, I said I loved going to movies, but I could never afford it when I was a kid. Like it was like my whole allowance was going to a movie. And so I was telling my mom one day that like I thought the coolest job in the world. I used to love Roger Ebert, and I would just sit and read his reviews, like I had a big book of them, like nonstop. Just like read, like I read reviews of movies I never even seen. I didn't care. And I was telling my mom that the best job in the world seemed like it would be to be a movie critic, because then you got to go to the movies for free. And she's like, that's an actual thing that you could do, and she encouraged me to write a letter to our local paper. I lived in a little town about 20 minutes north of Boston, and she encouraged me to write a letter to the editor of the local paper, saying that I thought that there should be like a movie review column for kids, by kids, or by a kid, me. And I did, and then I sort of did it, like kind of forgot about it. But then I heard back like maybe 3 months later, and they offered me this job writing like one. I had like a weekly column where I'd write one movie review, and then I would usually do like one new like in the theaters movie, and then I would review like a couple things on video, or I would review like some books, graphic novels or comic books, or like like a seasonal, like it's Halloween, like here's like 5 like awesome awesome Halloween movies. But what would happen is if the local video store was out of them, if someone had rented the movie, I couldn't watch it back then, so I was like, I would have to, it would be like picks that were recommended but also happened to be in stock at the local video store. So that's like the first writing that I really remember like doing, like that I sort of had to take seriously. And so that kind of turned into me wanting to write and direct movies. And I went to school for that. But when I got to school for that, I realized that something I'm still trying to kind of work my head around, is that like personality wise, I was no good at trying to direct stuff. I was way too shy and way too anxious to like ask people to kind of like give me their, give me your, can I please have your weekend so you can like, give me your your Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, so that you can help me. I'll give you some pizza if you help me make my film project, which was like how it worked at school, and like I did that for everybody else, but I just never felt comfortable doing it, and never felt comfortable with like sort of roping people into some like vision, half thought out vision that I had. So I was really, so everything that I would ever had to like direct or make, I was really bad. It's usually me doing it by myself or me with like one friend. And also I was not good. I'm not great with detail. And so like I would shoot this whole thing and then mess it up because I would mess up the film processing. It was just like back when it was actual film, stuff like that. So, but I discovered that I really liked the writing more than I knew kind of going into it, because that I could sit there, I could sit at my sort of, sit in my dorm room and I could work for like 6 hours on something and just by myself. And I could finish the whole project kind of by myself. There's no one that I sort of need to pull into it. And so that's when I started to really like writing. To like not to get really more serious about it, and so after college I figured I wanted to be a screenwriter. I sort of always, I'd known that for a long time, but that I knew that I wanted to be a screenwriter and not anymore. So the director thing was not in my head anymore. And so I moved to New York and began being a production assistant on like movies and TV shows, like Fear Factor, The Sopranos, some independent movies, a couple bigger movies. The Interpreter, which is really cool. That they shot that at the drawing a blank on what it's called. At the UN. I got to hang out at the UN for like a weekend. But so my plan was I was going to work on movies and then write movies, and then I would show people that I worked on, show the people that I worked on movies with the movies that I had written, and then I would sell one. But it was just such a different world, like the sort of the production side of it. I was so far removed from kind of the creative side of it that didn't, after about maybe a year or so, I had not made any progress. And so I took an internship in book publishing, thinking that would give me more time to write, and it did. And while doing that, I sort of discovered that I liked writing books, and I was closer to books, so that felt more achievable, even more than writing screenplays. So it was a weird, long process, kind of roundabout.
The Last Kids on Earth is a huge hit for Netflix. I assume anybody on a streaming service will at least take your call. Have you thought about getting back into screenwriting or film?
So I was with Last Kids. I was really lucky because everything had sort of changed from how I always sort of understand the way it worked, which was somebody would option a writer's book, or and then they would kind of just take it and make whatever they wanted with it. And then you'd hear maybe nothing from the author. You hear the author say, like famously, like, Stephen King hates The Shining. Doesn't like The Shining, but I was asked to be, I think he wrote, I think the first draft, right? They paid him to write a draft, I believe, The Shining. Just finished a new book yesterday. So I was asked from the beginning to be very involved with it. So I got to write a lot of it, which was, so that's when I got to do that. I got to actually write some stuff. Like write teleplays, scripts. I co-wrote the first episode, which is like sort of like a mini movie, 66 minutes, and then I wrote I think 2 or 3 episodes from each other season. So I have gotten to do that, and then I my best friend, one of my 3 or 4 sort of like close my best friends from high school, and the one who I most shared the kind of movie thing with. It was like our thing. We loved movies, and we ended up writing maybe 4 years ago. We wrote a movie together that we sold and got made. That was very like totally not kid, not a kid's thing. It was like it has like a John Carpenter sort of vibe. It's called VFW, which is like it's like a sort of horror action movie. And that was really cool because we wrote it, and it was like my friend from like growing up when we were driving around in cars when we were 16 talking about movies we would want to make one day. And then 20 years later we got to write and produce one. So that was like really, really, really cool. And so we're still working on other stuff like that. And in the back of my sort of, there's a lot of files on my computer with half-started screenplay ideas and stuff like that, and some stuff that I would really like to focus on. But the Last Kids book series schedule keeps me pretty busy. And so there's some other middle grade book series ideas that I have, a couple adult book ideas that I have, and then some sort of movie and 1 or maybe 2 TV ideas that I have that I really would like to play around with. But for the most part, the Last Kids book series schedule keeps me too busy to give it the time it deserves. So it'll have to wait a couple of years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And as a fan of The Last Kids on Earth, I can't complain about that. That's I want to talk a lot about The Last Kids, and I want to talk about the newest Last Kids on Earth and the Forbidden Forest. It's available now, esteemed audience. You can be pulling it up while you're listening to us, whenever you're listening to us. But I want to talk a little bit about working for St. Martin's Press. Sure. Because from the outside, being there in the marketing with the marketing with the publisher, that seems like a huge advantage. Now, obviously, Last Kids on Earth stands on its own merit. All you have to do is sit down and read it. I'm like, oh, it makes sense why this would be so popular. I can see why children are gravitating. I've seen them when I teach. I see that book regularly being carried around by students. Like, so it stands on its own, but just on paper, that looks like, well, what a huge advantage for somebody who's going to become a mega successful author to start right there working in marketing. What do you learn that while you're working in marketing that maybe sets you up for success, you think?
I mean, it was huge. And that's like when people ask, whenever like friends ask me, like I want to be a writer, I want to sort of get into this, I'm always like, you should go work in book publishing, which for a long time was a really probably annoying answer because it means you had to move to New York City or maybe Boston, maybe San Francisco, but that's about it. Now there's more, right now there's a lot of, you can do it from everywhere, anywhere. Like over the pandemic, my editors have, who used to all be had to be in New York City, moved. One is in Nashville now, and one moved to Austin, and one further out into New York. It doesn't really go to the office anymore. So it's more achievable now from sort of anywhere. But I think I learned a lot about marketing, which has been helpful, working on Last Kids, and it's something that I sort of enjoy weirdly. Like I like the thinking and stuff around marketing and like how to kind of talk about something in different exciting to me, ways to try to sort of cut through the noise of all the many books that come out. That was something I found really intimidating when I was intimidating, sort of cripplingly so sometimes when I was trying to be a writer, was going to, I would go to the bookstore, walk around, sort of looking for ideas and looking to see what other people were writing, what was popular. And there's so many books out, like there's so many books. Like if you're a movie fan, pretend it's 2020 or 2019. Every weekend there's like 6 sort of kind of major movies that come out or something, and those are the ones that you're aware of. And but if you're a reader, it's like every Tuesday it's like 700 books come out. And so it felt very intimidating to try to be like, how does any person rise to the top of that? Which I know I don't mean in terms of success or anything or quality, but just like, cut through all of those books to sort of get any focus or attention, to be seen. So it was helpful in that I like that part of marketing where you're trying to figure out sort of like how do you do that with a book. Here's a new book that we're really excited about and we've read it and we all think it's really great. What's a fun thing we can do? I like the sort of like fun outside the box kind of ideas. But I think more like practically for me, it was more about I was in my like mid-20s, in my 20s basically when I was in book publishing. And so I was like always just, going to lunch and happy hour and parties on the weekends at people's houses and apartments and stuff in New York City with friends who were editors and friends who were agents sometimes and friends who were publicists and a lot in marketing. That was like kind of my social circle, which again, like kind of back to, I don't know, keep talking about the pandemic, but it's very weird when I think about the fact that they don't really go into the office anymore. Like I know at Penguin, who publishes Last Kids, they don't have offices anymore. They have a floor that you can go and you get to borrow a desk, like a WeWork or something, like a hot desk. They don't have like an office anymore. That was like my entire social. I wouldn't have had any friends though, if I hadn't had my job, and that's where like I looked forward to going. And that's how that was like my community. And so there I had like friends who were agents and editors and stuff, and I could go and ask them questions and say like, hey, I want to write. I want to write I always wanted to write professionally, by which I mean like I tried to look at it in a business way as opposed to like I think it's easy especially with book writing, I think it's easy for people to get kind of lost in like, I'll wait for like the creativity to sort of hit me and then I'll write something and I was like, okay, what can I sell? How can I make a living doing this? Which is how I ended up writing lots of, activity books, sticker books, trivia books, things like that. Anything that would just sort of like help me pay the rent. It wasn't at all picky. But it helped me kind of get a sense of what the market was like, which was bad for a while because I spent a lot of time trying to write to what I thought I could sell and what I thought people were buying. And I wrote a lot of books that were like off, like proposals and stuff that they were just awful, like stuff that I was just not good at writing, like bad military thrillers, and like I try like a bad sort of Sex in the City, but they're all bank robbers together, like no, they're like cat burglars together, and they would like these heists and a lot of stuff like that where I was like, okay, this is what seems to be popular, and I would like take it and change it and kind of make it into something of my own. So there's a good side and a downside to that, sort of trying to treat it very much like this is a job, but how do you write something that will pay your bills? But I got to meet a lot. My whole community was people who help books get made. So that's how I met my agent. My first agent was just through a friend, when I had written a proposal that I finally really liked. And she was like, oh yeah, I know a guy who might be good for this. And I emailed him and that became my agent. And that happened sort of similarly. I can't really say similarly again for my second agent, who's my current agent. And so yeah, that was the way it was most like sort of practically helpful to me.
Gotcha. But of course, there's lots of people that are working in publishing, all invited on the show. Get in touch with me. Let's make this happen. Lots of people working in publishing, lots of people who go on to publish books. Very few who have then gone on to be as prolific as you, and who have had the success that you've had. And I know that there's always been an element of chance to that. But I only believe that to a point. And I know that you're working on stuff like Lego, Adventure Time, Steven Universe. You're doing lots of work for hire, and that's training you just to get things on the paper. I assume you're not being overly precious when you're trying to pay your rent with those, right?
No, I wasn't being overly precious. But that's sort of how it ended up. The Adventure Time, Lego, sort of Steven Universe, a couple other shows. That was where the first kind of kids that I sort of stumbled into the kids thing too. Like I the writing books and also writing for children were both sort of I wouldn't say accidents, but were not like was not the plan that I sort of set out with. So like when I sat like I would say I had like it was like a 6'4" walk up I lived in, and you could go as long as like the super wasn't around, you could go all the way up and kind of push through the fire, like the roof exit. I'd go up there at night and on the weekends, and it was warm, and I would sit out there with this lousy old beach chair on the roof, and I would sit there and write. And when I was doing that, what I was usually writing was sort of adult stuff, like zombie stuff. Like I'm a huge zombie nerd, and had been for like forever, because I grew up in Pittsburgh for a while, so I was very aware of Dawn of the Dead and George Romero and stuff from like an early age. And I remember always being like, I want to make my own zombie thing. Then they became really popular once. I mean, for me, it always felt like it started 20 Days Later, and then the Dawn of the Dead remake, the James Gunn one, and then the Walking Dead kind of all sort of hitting within the same 5 years or so. I remember being like bummed out, like, man, that's like what I would want to do, and now like people are doing it, and like I'm gonna miss my chance, but like still going strong. So I would write zombie stuff for adults, and then it was only because I started doing those work for hire projects that I started to sort of find a kid's voice, which I found came very naturally to me, like way more naturally than most adult writing that I'd been doing came to me. And my adult writing was also like pretty much like a kid, but just a kid who's like swearing a lot in a way, like, you know, like like the choose your own adventure style book that I did. It's all second person, you know, so it's like you do this, you do that, and it's sort of just like me and talking like with my own voice, and I sound like a 24-year-old kid, and it's not that much different probably than the voice of Jack in like the First Last Kids book. It's sort of less mature in a way. So yeah, so I sort of that work for hire stuff was not overly precious about, but it's what allowed me to kind of stumble into like, oh, like this is really fun writing for kids. I really enjoy this. This really just kind of comes to me, as opposed to sort of trying to sort of force it as much. Which doesn't mean I don't still want to write adult stuff sometimes, but the kid's voice really came to sort of happily kind of came to me.
For the record, should any producers be listening, I am not the target audience for Sex and the City, but if it had some heist in it, I might tune in. That sounds like an improvement.
I know. It was. I some of those ideas I thought were okay. That one was, yeah. It was. They would like you know, Samantha sort of like go home with one, and then they'd always kind of get roped into like a heist involving one of the different guys, sort of thing. And yeah, I had a lot of those sort of weird ideas, like not that weird, but like a lot of those like very like so mainstream that it's absurd kind of ideas.
Is it Army of the Dead or whatever the Zack Snyder casino heist with zombies movie was?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that works. It works fine.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Put some heist in there. It'd be great. Put some zombies in there too. You can't have too many.
Honestly, that's such a weird one. It's like, wait, why are there zombies in this? And that's one. That's also one that I had kind of written a little bit proposal for. It was I forget if it wasn't Vegas. There was a city that there was like a zombie outbreak, and it got sort of siloed off, like Escape from New York style, and they had to sneak in, and it wasn't a heist. They had to steal a person, I think, sort of like Escape from New York. But it was like a female getaway driver who was hired to like do like the ultimate zombie drive into the city. That was another one.
I know I love zombies, and it's because I'm terrified of other people, especially when they all get together. They get some crazy ideas. Oh, watch out! Why do you love zombies?
It's whenever I answer that question, I sort of try to come up with something smart, and I don't think there's a smart answer. I think it's because, and it's funny. I talked about this recently on an interview, not that exactly, but about like why I love writing about end of the world stuff. And I was just finally sort of like really honest about it. And I was like, because like when I was a kid, it seemed like a really cool playground, like to be able to kind of do whatever you want. And like there were kind of no rules. And I wasn't giving any thought to sort of, the Romero movies particularly, or sort of there's a lot of social commentary and stuff. But I remember seeing those and just being like, oh, it looks really fun to have a whole mall to myself and kind of be able to do whatever I want, and run around and be with like my 3 best friends, and we could drive the cars that they had, the cars in the ground floor. You could get in there and drive those and run over a bunch of zombies, and then some bikers come. You got to run up the stairs and run up the escalator, and then hide amongst the what do you dress up? The sort of the not puppets, but the sort of dummies that they dress up in the clothes, and you go to the fishing. Yes, and you go to the fishing store and you get your fishing line, you use it to make a gadget and stop some. Like it all just looked very fun. That was like watching, it looked like a fun adventure. And so that's sort of what drew me to, and also just the visual of like end of the world stuff is so striking. I think it's a large part of still why people like it. Just sort of New York covered in vines and Statue of Liberty sticking out of the sand is like just a striking, cool, scary image. And so I like the zombies. I like zombies because they felt like this sort of like there's like an endless supply of almost like lemmings you can sort of just kind of do weird stuff with. When I did that, it was called Can You Survive the Zombie Apocalypse, was the I forget what we called it, Pick Your Own Path book, or when I did one for Adventure Time, it was called Which Way Dude. That was like their lingo for it. But the fun of it was just, I remember sitting around and thinking of like, what are different ways that what are different cool like zombie scenarios? I came up with like 100 of them or something, and that's how the different paths all branched. So I just liked these sort of like endless lemming kind of these things are going to come at you, and you got to chop them and blow them up and all this, and it sort of removes any for me, unlike a lot of other fiction, or other fiction handles it differently, but always removed sort of like the moral dilemma of it. It's just like it was on. It's like I feel like a kid watching, like a Schwarzenegger movie where he's just like just destroying 80 awful bad guys, and you don't have to think about it. And so I felt like zombies are sort of like that, where it's they're gonna come and bite you, turn you into one. So you gotta throw a firecracker in there, and like that to me is sort of part of just the fun of it. Yeah.
You don't have to feel bad about it. They're already dead. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. Like you don't have to feel bad about it. Yeah, exactly. They're already dead. Like you're not killing them. Unlike there's no gray area. Yeah.
we're talking briefly about video games. That's something that always, for me, underrides, like The Last of Us 1 and 2, where there's these big moral questions about, should I commit this murder or not? But we've just played a video game level during which you've had to kill 30 people to get to this actual pivotal cutscene where you have to decide. And it kind of undercuts the drama. On the other hand, I don't want to play the level without villains. So
I love video games. I play a lot of video games. I never I think I always when I'm on like video game forums and websites and stuff, there's always people talking about favorite stories, and sort of I saw like a Reddit thread recently about like what video game made you cry. And I've never been able, I don't think, 'cause I can think of maybe one example in Majora's Mask, where I ever felt like I've never been able to separate like I just spent 6 hours, messed up. So I kept running into the wrong table. I kept running. My character kept getting hung up on a table. I was supposed to be running to do this, like that. I'm the one controlling this and making him run around in circles sometimes and bop into trees. And also that, like those sort of kind of big dramatic moments, something like The Last of Us. Yeah, you're snapping like 20 dudes necks just to get there. And then, then it's like, then they have like a big dramatic cutscene. I find video game stories hard to get sucked into, because I love video games, but I really play them for the challenge and the sometimes the social aspect when it's not like something online, or I've never really been able to, and I'm jealous of people who are able to get really pulled into the story or like sort of the decision making type thing about it, because it's like I know that I'm in control and I'm probably lousy at the game. I just watched this guy, some racing game, like drive off a cliff 35 times. They couldn't get it right.
Well, it's rare, but Horizon Zero Dawn and Red Dead Redemption 2 both come to mind. Both of those are games that brought me to tears. Red Dead Redemption 2, a couple of times, replaying it even. I know what's going to happen, and still, it hits.
Those are. I mean, I love both of those. I didn't play the second Zero Dawn. I played Zero Dawn. I played the expansion that they had. BioShock is maybe one where I got close. That was like that story wise. And like the Red Dead was like story wise was that's a really good example too of one where like there's like these moral dilemmas, but like when it's not when you're not doing that part of the game, it's like you're just mowing down like, or you're riding along and just hijacking stagecoaches left and right, and those are fantastic games.
So I could talk to you about video games forever, but I'm watching our time. I know I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk a little bit more about zombies. So Last Kids on Earth, when you're writing that, does that start as a proposal, or do you sit down and write, I'm going to write the thing that I most want in the world, or how does that come about?
It was sort of, I want to write the thing that I most want in the world. It was, so it sort of ties back to the movie thing, which had kind of been the original kind of driving force behind me wanting to kind of make stories, was wanting to basically make Star Wars. That's the thing that I love most. So I figured out that I like writing for kids, and then illustrated novels became popular. Like what we sort of know now is like the sort of modern illustrated novel, like Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries and Big Nate and things like that, where they're heavily illustrated, and the illustrations are really interwoven with the story to the point where you can't really remove one or the other and have it still work. I mean, they do audiobooks of Last Kids, they do audiobooks of I think all those series, but you know, the illustrations really telling the either the punchline or moving the story forward, as opposed to like I'm trying to think of stuff that I read growing up as illustrated, where it was sort of like the illustrations are more there to support the story, or even like Eerie Elementary, which I write, the illustrations there to kind of support the story, and also like it's a context clue thing for readers. But I really love the idea. This is like me spending again like a lot of time walking around bookstores, seeing what was popular. I really loved the idea of one of the initial big sort of thoughts that I had was, could you do something that was a little bit like Wimpy Kid, a little bit like Big Nate, but not about middle school life, like not about like the sort of drama and comedy of middle school, but about like big action adventure, like zombies, like a big zombie sort of thing with monsters and like Indiana Jones scope action stuff. And so when I first started writing Last Kids, it was like it had a diary format. Not a diary, it was like a sort of, it was Jack sort of broadcast, it was like, I think it was called like Dispatches from the Treehouse at the End of the World, was like one of the early titles that I was playing around with, and one of the early, you know, first couple of days that I tried writing it. And he was sort of talking into almost like vlogging or something, talking into like just talking to the world, not knowing if anybody was listening, and it was sort of like, you know, a transcript of what was going on. So I liked the idea of being able to tell this sort of big action story, adventure zombie story, and try and do it in a way where it could. I liked how cinematic those illustrated novels feel, and still feel, and so that's what I sort of was one of the first big ideas was like, oh, could you do that format for adventure stuff? And then so it became a proposal. It became a proposal of, I don't know, maybe 50 pages or so, 40 pages, that I wrote and I rewrote a bunch of times. And then it became a proposal first.
Something I bumped into, because I originally, my zombie book started out, well, it was going to be middle grade. I was going to focus younger kids, and then I wanted the zombies to stay violent. I wouldn't do cartoonish zombies. They had to be really violent. And as soon as one, you know, did something inappropriate, so let's just change. Let's up the age of my protagonist here. It's YA now. We're going to have violence. How do you manage to steer? And I know there's cartoonish violence, but how do you manage to steer clear of the inherent darkness of the apocalypse and keep things relatively light and fun without, because there is darkness. I mean,
yeah,
around the edges.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Because that's what I think I spend the most, at least for a while, spent the most time thinking about. So the first book, it took me about 3 years to write the first Last Kids book, because I had a proposal that was pretty similar to what Last Kids ended up being, and then and sort of tying back to what I said before about how I really was focused on trying to write like for a living and sort of treat like a job, you know. And if you're a carpenter, you don't get to pick what houses you're gonna build. I don't know, that's a bad analogy, but you know, I had rent to pay, and around that, when Last Kids, I started working on that, I was just getting married, and just like sort of life felt like it was going too fast, and but I had stuff I had responsibilities that I hadn't had before. So I had there's an agent who I really wanted to be my agent, and he read Last Kids, which at the time the proposal was called The Treehouse at the End of the World, and it was very, very similar to, pretty similar to what the final product was. but he had the note that you sort of are talking about, that it's like it was too dark. Like, how do you write about like a true end of the world apocalypse thing? Not like, there's not going to be a magic fix to it. The a bunch of the, everybody sort of turned into an actual zombie, that's, and not like, not some sort of like their eyes are swirly and they, no, like they want to eat the kids and turn them into zombies too, like the mailman and the neighbor. And then there's huge monsters who are trying to eat the kids or destroy the kids or eat you see them eat zombies. Like Jack sees his neighbor's head get chomped off, I think, at one point. So it's definitely serious in that sense. And so that was the big note that I got, was this agent who I wanted to represent the book series, represent me as an author, thought that the tone and the stakes didn't quite match like the voice of the sort of like sarcastic first person, kind of like funny sarcastic first person narrator Jack. And so I went back and I reworked it, and I changed a bunch of it to make it like a portal fantasy thing where they would go back and forth through this treehouse, and they would go through the treehouse and come back, and there was like a sort of like a magic door inside this treehouse that would lead to like an alternate reality, an alternate version of their hometown. I was watching a lot of what's it called back then? Let's say Psych, not Psych. What's like that sort of X-Files-y show with
no, that's probably too old.
It'll pop in my head. I'm drawing a blank. And my recall has really gotten awful with like, picturing the whole show. Fringe. And so they would travel back, and the kids would travel back and forth to this like alternate reality version of their hometown, because that was another thing that I wanted to, it was like one of the kind of like big sort of like, there's maybe like 5 or 6 kind of like big kind of like building blocks or like things that kind of came together to kind of make to be the series. And there were things I wanted to do, and one was that it was big, like epic, like I said before, like sort of I pictured it as like Indiana Jones style, but like Marvel movie sized action sequences and stuff like that, but all taking place like in suburbs, and suburban locations. So like the places that I would imagine when I was a kid, like stuff happening, like the water park or the Home Depot or Target or whatever. And so that's the kids would go to this end of the world version of their hometown, get into adventures. There was like bad stuff going on over there. Like there was some sort of like evil spirit thing in charge, but it was like their gym teacher had been like transformed. It was very different. And so I spent about 2 years. I reworked the proposal, submitted it, like gave it to the agent like that, my agent like that he liked. That we sent around to a bunch of publishers, and Penguin liked it. And then when it came time to actually write it, and I talked about this on, I got to do a guest post for John Scalzi's blog, which is really cool. I talked about this sort of process in like a lot of detail, but then I had to actually write the full book of that version, and I hated it. Like I was miserable, because I wanted to write like a real end of the world book, not like a there's a door to the end of the world book. And so after like, I don't know, 18 months or so of trying to make that, I got a finished manuscript out of it, but I didn't like it at all. And so then I called my editor like almost in tears basically one night, or I talked to my wife about it, like in tears one night. I called my editor the next day. I was like, I know that the book's like 6 months late at this point or whatever it was, but can I go back and write this book that you guys didn't really buy? But I wanted to write the whole time, and I did, and that became what Last Kids is. But the notes that they had given me along the way, along these many really not very good and really not fun, like the fun wasn't there as a writer, so it wasn't coming through as fun for the reader. These many different bad drafts that the tone, I found a tone that kind of bridged the two, so it did work for the end of the world thing. So and a very long answer to that question, but that is like the first 3 years of the series were all about that question of like how to do that, how to balance those two things. I think a lot of it is from Jack's sort of narrative voice, his first person sort of whatever that phrase is, and that he's a little bit he's funny, sarcastic, he's really gung-ho positive about stuff. He really just kind of tackles things with let's go get it. And that is sort of how it I kind of try to, smooth over the bumps between this is a world where these kids don't know what happened to their parents, their neighbors are getting eaten, but also they're going to have so much fun because they get to the candy store and eat anything they want. They can go to the video game store, come home with all the video games they want, and no one's going to yell at them for chewing gum and throwing out the treehouse window in the backyard. So that's sort of how
And they occasionally get to fight monsters and zombies, and who doesn't want to do that?
Exactly. And they get to do it's like they're just living in the daydreaming. They're living out like the daydreams that I had when I was a kid with me and my friends, like what I wanted to do. So the big epic stuff. Be like a cool hero.
And I have the good fortune, of course, to be talking with you here with book 8, although I think it's number 13 in the series overall.
So confusing.
Within the direct continuity.
It's numbered book 8, but it's basically it's like number 11 in the sort of narrative storyline, because there's 3 books that we didn't give numbers out of me fearing that I would get angry emails from readers because they're not Jack's not narrating them, so there's not the same sort of voice as usual, and Jack, the main character, is not in them as much, if at all, as usual. One is a book just from June's point of view, one's a book from Quentin Dirk's point of view, and one is a sort of graphic novel that sort of shows little mini adventures for each of them, and then kind of bridges books. What is it? Bridges books like 4 and 7, like what the bad guys have been doing between 4 and 7 when we haven't seen them for a little while. So it's like book 5.5 and sort of like 7.5-ish is how it ends up working. But yeah, so there's about 11 books, even though.
Do you have an end in mind, or I mean, theoretically, this can go forever, right?
No, I wish. So I'm around around book 5. I felt like I was kind of being faced with, can they just kind of do this forever and continue to go on, monster of the week, monster of the book sort of things? Or is it going to be a transition into something that feels more like this is the big goal quest for the series, and I felt myself getting pulled towards like this is the big big quest, but that was scary because I knew that kind of would give it a number, like there would be I'd have to have an end in mind because I couldn't keep going. And I also found myself struggling with trying to keep giving the kids like emotional arcs and stuff within each book. When, on book 9 or book 10, is it, like, what's Jack going through this time? I found that without sort of knowing where it was going and having a sort of a plan for it, that was really difficult. And of course, there's all sorts of books that you don't need that, and that works just fine. Like Indiana Jones, that's I'm still thinking movies, but like, James Bond, Indiana Jones, those characters don't change much. They just sort of go out and have a cool adventure, and that's it. And that's why we love those things, I think. But when it's in the first person, at least for me, this is just me, like I had trouble writing it without Jack sort of having to kind of learn something and figure out something about himself and about friendship and life and stuff like that. So I think there will be, his number 8 just came out. I think there'll be 3 or 4 more like main books in the series. So I have an end in mind. I have an end in mind. Right now I'm working on book 9. I'm behind as usual, but and it's a little bit different than book 8 and book 9. The closer it gets to sort of an end, the more the books start to get a little bit different, because just have to kind of, the kids find themselves in different situations. They have to, or else you sort of retread, going over ground you've already walked. So they end up also being different. Then there's new challenges, like you said, balancing like this spooky with the action with the sort of lighthearted, Goonies feeling, hijinks of it. That same stuff happens and pops up, but in new and different ways as the series gets on.
When do you know that this is you struck gold? There's going to be a series, there's going to be a video game. Forever, on all the great things that you're going to continue to do after this, there will always be Max Brallier, probably author of The Last Kids on Earth. When does that sink in that you've done it?
It did. I don't know. I don't know if it did. I mean, or if I don't think it really has, and I don't. It sort of, it doesn't feel like I can. I don't know. It's a tough question. I know you mean. I think with the TV show, it always felt like it was like a cool conversation I was having. That would be really fun to do, but it never really felt that realistic until suddenly it was real. And then that was like, oh wow, okay. And then that sort of that became very real very quickly. But it was such a whirlwind. Like the first conversation I had with the producer about possibly doing it was like the day after my daughter was born, my first child, and my first only child. And so like that was like a very busy time, just a crazy time. I think we moved 4 times in 4 years, something like that, or 5 years. So it was all just kind of like trying to catch my breath. And there was, maybe around book 6 or 7, I felt like, okay, like this is, people are buying a lot of copies of this book, and that's good. And that was really nice. But I really was, and I'm still always like mostly kind of consumed by like, I don't want the next one to suck. I don't want people to not like it. Like really, like which is silly. That I should be so worried about that. So I don't think I ever had like truly, except for when Mark Hamill voiced one of the characters in the show, and I was like, and I said, I remember like waking up my wife and being like, this, like, did I die? And this is like every occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Like I felt like I had, like maybe I like had, that something happened and I was just living out this kind of imagined very fun version of what like I would have wanted my life to be when I was in 6th grade. It's like, oh, you're writing a Dawn of the Dead sort of thing but for kids. It's got a big quest to it, and then Luke Skywalker's gonna do one of the voices, and they're gonna fly to Los Angeles, and like it all felt really not believable, like to the point of like, this can't be real, like literally like at night, like, is this actually but I think it is, unless you live in a simulation, or everybody says all the time now. So I don't know when or if it ever really kind of felt like, oh, like this is now a big thing. But the first time I hit the New York Times bestseller list, that was really cool, because I knew that you only had to do it for 1 week. get one, and then forever, whenever anything you write, top it would say New York Times bestselling author. So the same thing it says for Stephen King, it would say for me if I just hit it for 1 week on the children's list. And I remember really thinking about that, and like when my editor called to tell me that I think it was the second book hit for hit the New York Times bestseller list for a couple of weeks. The first one I ever did. I remember hanging up, being like, okay, so now I can just say that forever. I just needed to do that once, and now I can say that forever. And that'll help the next book. Like that's sort of the way I was thinking about it.
I'm watching our time, and it's nearly gone. Esteemed audience knows I can't not ask. Max Brallier, have you ever seen a ghost and or a flying saucer?
No. No. And I think, have you ever seen a ghost?
Not a ghost, no.
No. If I saw a ghost, people tell me they've seen ghosts, I never really believe it, because if I saw a ghost, my brain would be so fried. My entire scope, my entire look at everything. If I suddenly knew that my relatives were walking around me, in a dead form, and that also there was an afterlife, and that maybe the way that I live now was going to cause me to live in limbo, or sort of stuck hanging around a house haunting it. The amount of time that I spent thinking about, like, I don't want the next kid's book to suck. The amount of time I would spend thinking about what I think an eternity would look like my brain would melt, I think, if I ever saw a ghost. I think that's why I never sort of believe people who say they saw ghosts. I can see weird stuff, but if I ever, and also I would just be so scared, like in movies, whenever people react to ghosts, or people react to anything, they'll be like walking out, or they'll be like in the kitchen, they turn around, someone's like standing there, and they go like, and I would scream. It happens to me all the time. Like sometimes I'll come downstairs, or I'll be sitting downstairs at night. My daughter will wake up and come downstairs, and I'll get up to go to the fridge, and I'll see her standing there, and I will scream like bloody murder. Like I'm terrified. It just so if I saw a ghost, like if I saw some like messed up floating haunt face or something, it would be, I think I'd die of a heart attack, or I would just I can't imagine that. And I've never seen a UFO. That's much more believable to me. And I always thought like there's definitely life out there, and then I started reading a little bit more about it, and then I was reading about the Fermi paradox, whatever. So maybe there's not. It's confusing. It would be very cool. Like that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about. Like, what would the world, what would that actually be like, just to live through, finding that out? And yeah, I think about that a lot. So no, I've never seen either. No, I've never seen either. If I can see one or the other, I would rather see a UFO than a ghost.
Fair enough. This has been an absolute privilege and a pleasure. I wish I had another hour with you. You've got more books coming. Come back. We'll do this again sometime, and we'll go through and break down the individual books. For tonight, my last question for you is, from the outside, you've got the video game, you've got the series, you've got the action figures. It looks like every author's dream has come true for you through a lot of hard work and determination, as well as luck. Is there a downside to having that much good come to you through a series?
It's
okay if there isn't.
no, I think I don't think that there's necessarily a downside, but I think what I would say is that just the way that I'm wired, I don't find myself particularly able to just sort of this is fun, I guess enjoy this, because I'm worried about it's like climbing a mountain or something, and you might get a great view, but then if that great view causes you to slip, you fall off, and then it's over. And so I've always felt like, and stupidly so, that if sort of get distracted or kind of rest on my laurels, whatever, at the phrase, that then the next book's not any good, and one book's not as good as the previous ones, and sort of the word gets around, kids stop buying it, and then it all falls apart, and it's like a house of cards that sort of collapses. So I would say that there's, certainly not a downside, and the upsides are the ones that I think that are more maybe less expected. Like I've gotten to, because I've gotten to tour a lot for the books. I've gotten to go to, we're just talking about guest you had on, Alison Gerber is a friend of mine. I've gotten to go to a lot of author festivals, things like that, and really make a community of author friends that I didn't have before, which is like really, 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 really nice. So that's one thing that kind of came out of it that was like, oh, this is wonderful. This is just plain wonderful. Yeah, that's my answer.
Where can esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media, and all that good stuff?
MaxBrallier.com, www.maxbrallier.com. It's Max, M-A-X, and Brallier is B-R-A-L-L-I-E-R. And then I'm on Instagram as Max_loves_pants_. Even though I don't, I like the word pants. I was talking about this to somebody else a couple days ago. I wear shorts now all the time, but the word pants cracks me up. And not on Twitter, but it was driving me loony. And then there's like www.lastkidsOneEarth.com is like last kids updates and stuff like that. Oh, and I have a Facebook author page, which I try to be better about doing.
As always, esteemed audience, for more of the greatest interviews with the greatest people on earth, head to middlegradeninja.com. Download your free copy of Banneker Bones and the Giant Robot Bees. It will change your life. Pay cash money for All Together Now, a Zombie Story. It will also change your life. And God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.